Now, one of the questions I get from so many people is, what kind of equipment do you use? Because having an electric guitar obviously means that you have to interface yourself with technology. Now, tell you a quick story. I was doing an album for a Japanese label called LA Guitar Workshop, and they wanted to take pictures of all our equipment, our gear. So they brought the photographers in the studio, and they shot a bunch of shots. Everybody had monolithic monster racks full of goodies and stuff like that, which I'm not putting down, because if you're a studio musician, you need to be able to call on a myriad effects, because you have to be able to do what the producer tells you to. But this was not really a studio session. This was sort of playing what you wanted to play. Anyway, they took all these pictures, and then the guy came up to me and said, "Excuse me, but can I take a picture of your gear?" I said, "Absolutely." And he said, "Well, where is it?" And I said, "Well, it's right there on the floor." He said, "But that's just a direct box." I said, That's it. That's my equipment." He goes, No, nobody can do that." And I say, "Hey, listen to what we've done. All I've done is plug the guitar directly into the console. And throughout this video, most of the guitar playing that you've heard is just the guitar plugged directly into the console. Maybe a little echo to give it some space. And I put a little bit of compression on it, obviously, so I don't drive the guys that are running the audio over here crazy. But basically, it's just the sound of the instrument. However, if you're a studio musician, or you're playing live, or you're working with songwriters, you're doing jingles, movie soundtracks, anything like that, you need an arsenal of gear. You don't have to have a lot of it, but you have to have certain choice effects, like reverb, delay, distortion, compression, and of course your basic chorus and pitch bending effects, which give the guitar a lot of space. So there's a lot of ways to do that. You can buy them separately. Now, I'm not going to get into a bunch of endorsements here, although I do work for some companies that make some very fine gear. But you can buy them either separately in little what we call stomp boxes, or you can buy units which aggregate all of these effects into one box called multi-effects units. Roland makes them, Korg makes them, Digitech makes them. A lot of people make these boxes specifically for guitar players. Now, obviously, the difference between a clean guitar and a guitar with distortion and a guitar with some effects on it is very different. And certainly, if you wanted to create, if the producer or the record date said, "Well, you know what I want is kind of an ethereal vibe. I want you to make the guitar more of an effect than an instrument." So you go, "Oh, yeah, I got that right for you here." And he goes, "Oh, that was great. Thank you very much. Next cue." Or he says, "I want some rock and roll. I want this to be balls to the wall." And you go, "Okay." And you go, "Excuse me, I didn't have the right effect on." Now, these are all outside effects that are interfaced between you and your instrument that help you translate a little bit more about what's inside you, or what you want to do, what kind of effect you want to have on people. But the one thing I must caution you about is, do not let the effects affect you. I hate this, it sounds kind of silly, but don't let the effects become a crutch. If you're a fine guitarist, you should be able to pick up an acoustic guitar and play wonderfully. The effects are only an addition. They're only an adjunct. They're only something to help you in certain situations and to expand your horizons. But as a guitar player, I think we went through this before in a little bit earlier, but I want to say it again. It really drives me nuts when some guy comes up and he says, "I can't play with you. You want to jam?" "Yeah, I'd like to jam, but I can't get my sound." "Well, what is your sound?" "Well, it's an XYZ fuzz tone with an intergalactic magnetohydrodynamic laser-driven neutron particle beam accelerator here in stereo." And you go, "Well, that's really great, but do you play the guitar?" "Oh, yeah, I play the guitar." "Well, can you play?" No, man, I don't have my sound." Well, that's really a shame, because as a guitar player, you should have whatever's inside you. You should be able to pick up any one of these instruments and make something happen. But the effects are important, because if you want to make a living at this, you have to have what we call, effects, phasing, flanging, and distortion. Now, the only thing I can tell you is try to find effects that are as noiseless as possible. In other words, when you put the effect into the chain, it creates as little noise as possible, especially if you're recording. That's one of the reasons why when you walk into a professional recording studio and you see a session guitar player, Dennis Budimir or Timmy May or any of the guys, they have racks and racks of very expensive gear. And I didn't mean to put it down before because it's not a put down per se. The reason they have that kind of expensive gear is to create as little noise as possible and as fine and quality sound as possible. But that doesn't mean that you have to go out and spend $5,000 either. If you're going to go play in a club, if you add 1 or 2 dB or 3 dB of distortion to your sound, it's not going to make any difference. Nobody's going to know the difference. So don't drive yourself crazy by going out and trying to buy the most expensive piece of gear you can find. Just buy the gear that works for you, that fills your needs. Because if it wants, another thing that drives me nuts is seeing some poor guy who goes out there after working for 4 or 5 months to buy a $3,000 or $4,000 piece of gear. It's not fair. He doesn't need that. And he shouldn't be driven to do that. And you do not need that. Just find the piece of gear that works for you. And use your effects tastefully. Don't use them as a crutch. And also, don't be afraid to try things that are a little different. I mean, you know, say you want to plug in your old fuzz tone. Just because it wasn't made in the 1990s doesn't mean it doesn't have any validity. Or your old phase wah, or whatever kind of old effect that you have. One of the nice things about effects is they give you ideas. Just like when you put a drum machine up for the first time, you hit drum pattern number 1, 0, bank 0, fine 0, and you hit it, and you go, oh, that gives me an idea for a song. Effects are real good for that because they change your attitude and they change your way of looking at your own playing. But just be careful. Use them tastefully, use them when it's needed, and don't let yourself get caught up in it.